3 years into forcing George to be with me, I was diagnosed with cancer. The surgery required a signature from a family member, but I had no family, only George. I dialed his number, and a cold laugh came through the line. "James, you'd better just die out there." I laughed too, my voice soft and gentle. "Fine by me. Just don't you dare come looking for me when it's over." My phone was accidentally on speaker. The entire consultation room heard the half-minute conversation. I gave the doctor an apologetic smile, got up, and left. My assistant followed at my side, speaking cautiously. "Mr. Wilson, the voice on the phone just now, it didn't sound like Mr. Armstrong." I stopped beside a trash can, took the diagnostic report from his hand, and tossed it in. "I know," I said flatly. George was a man of refined upbringing. He couldn't say something so vicious. At most, he'd frown and chide me helplessly. "James, stop fooling around." The thought made me laugh for some reason. George must have thought this was just my latest scheme to mess with him. The timing was just too perfect. The moment he went to visit Nathan, who had a cold and fever, I called to tell him I had cancer. He thought my methods were despicable and that I was just acting out, which is why he let Nathan answer the phone for him. Of course, I knew he was right there, listening. That's why I still had to say it. "When the day comes, don't come looking for me." Before hanging up, I added one more thing. "Don't worry, I'll give him back to you in 3 months. Tops." That was specifically for Nathan. A little something to give him hope. He is my dear younger brother, after all. As I walked out of the hospital, I suddenly felt a weight on my shoulders. I glanced over and saw a jacket draped over me. The wind was strong, whipping Liam's tie up in front of his chest. My eyes traveled up, past his well-defined features, to a face that was, as always, a mask of calm. I'd heard the young women at the company gossip. They said Liam was some kind of trust fund kid, that his family owned a company too, and they couldn't figure out why he'd come to work as an assistant for someone else. "Liam, how long have you been with me?" 3 years minus a month. 3 years. I couldn't help but smile. I had just assumed he was a rich kid getting a taste of the real world. I never thought he'd last this long. I took off the jacket and draped it back over his shoulders as I walked. "What are your plans now?" When he didn't answer after a few seconds, I joked, "Thinking of trying another company. I can write you a letter of recommendation." Warmth spread across my back as the jacket was placed on me again. "I'm not leaving." I glanced at him, not breaking my stride. "Not leaving? What are you staying for? To collect my body?" "Mr. Wilson, I know that overseas. What did you call me?" I turned back, my expression indifferent. Liam met my gaze for 2 seconds before lowering his eyes, respectfully uttering 2 words. "Mr. Wilson." I smiled and nodded, patting his shoulder. "Since you call me Mr. Wilson, let's just talk business. Okay?" Liam's dark, bright eyes were filled with unspoken words. But in the end, he said nothing, just lowered his head and mumbled a quiet, "Okay." George's sick visit lasted for 3 days. When I got home from work on the 4th day, the apartment was still cold and empty. I took out my phone and typed out a message. "I want to see you within 2 hours. Otherwise, I'm going straight to Nathan." After hitting send, I tossed the phone aside and went to the liquor cabinet to grab a few bottles. George hated it when I used a commanding tone with him, and he hated it even more when I used Nathan to threaten him. But what could I do? It's not like I hadn't tried being nice and saying all the right things, but it was completely useless. So I had no choice but to tear off the mask. He'll do whatever it takes to get what he wants. That was George's assessment of me. He was a pretty good judge of character. That's exactly the kind of person I am. The first time I saw George was at the hospital. I was visiting my paralyzed father, and my stepmother was pointing at my face, calling me an ungrateful bastard, and even tried to throw boiling water at me. But someone shielded me. George, who had come to visit with Nathan, saw what was happening and, with lightning speed, pulled me behind him, turning his own back to block the scalding water. It was summer, and the back of George's neck was completely red. Nathan's eyes shot daggers at me, but George was still trying to smooth things over for me. He spoke calmly and deliberately, his every move exuding grace and refinement. After spending so long in a dark, empty pit. Seeing someone so bright and clean was, I admit, a little tempting. A little digging later, I found out Nathan had his eyes on him too, which only made me want to snatch him away even more. But George told me he preferred Nathan's type. Nathan. I savored the name, then turned around and canceled Nathan's credit cards. By then, I had already run my father's company into the ground. Nathan had been spoiled his whole life. He even had to hire someone to write his papers for his master's degree. A useless person like him couldn't survive without a source of income. As expected, Nathan broke up with George. What was unexpected was that George told Nathan he could support him. He had a PhD in chemistry he could sell patents to provide for him. So they got back together and Nathan lorded it over me for a while. But it didn't matter. Nathan's mother still depended on me. I gave him two choices: either go abroad and study quietly, or I'd have his mother committed to a mental institution. Nathan chose the former, and with the gall of a lion, demanded a huge sum for tuition. I gave it to him. Let's just call it hush money. George was still devastated after the breakup. I found him at a bar and took him to a hotel room. He must have been truly heartbroken, because he held me and called out Nathan's name. I slapped him, put my foot on his crotch, and forced him to say my name over and over. When he was fully lucid, I fucked him. George was smart. It didn't take him long to figure out I had forced Nathan to leave. That was the first day I kept him captive. George was so furious he broke the restraints and unleashed all his hatred on me. I'm not kidding, I was in bed for 2 days after that. George was a tough nut to crack, but his downfall was that he had a conscience. Between the money I invested in his research projects, the new equipment for his lab, and the top specialists I hired for his sick parents, he eventually compromised and agreed to live with me. After we moved in together, George was always cold and distant. I didn't care. Hot or cold, it all turned hot in bed. George's body and George's heart, I got at least one of them. A month ago, Nathan came back to the country. George found out, but he didn't go to him. In that moment, I actually had the illusion that I could keep him like this for a lifetime. But a few days ago, Nathan caught a cold, and the moment George heard, he rushed right over. See? Someone you've truly loved is always different. The memories came to a screeching halt. Just as I was about to open another bottle, I heard a click from the electronic lock on the door. The next moment, the pitch-black living room was flooded with light. The light was too harsh, and I instinctively raised a hand to shield my eyes. When I lowered my arm, I saw George frowning in disgust. He looked down at me, his gaze sweeping over the empty bottles beside me, his frown deepening, giving me attitude the second he walked in. In the past, I would have gotten angry and cursed him out, but now I felt nothing. My heart was like a pool of stagnant water. Just as I reached for another bottle, George grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. I swayed for a moment before finding my balance and asked casually, "How's my dear little brother doing?" George didn't answer, as if he'd taken a vow of silence. I looked down and smiled, hooking an arm around his neck and whispering, "Did you sleep with him, James?" George's face darkened with anger, his voice filled with warning. I ignored him, pulling his shirt from his pants and slipping my hand inside. I smirked. I need to check. George was strange tonight. He actually initiated a kiss, but I turned away. Clinging to his shoulders, I asked weakly, "Am I good in bed?" George frowned, saying nothing, a drop of hot sweat falling onto my collarbone. I narrowed my eyes, reaching up to wipe his sweaty chin, and cooperatively lifted my hips. "Then why can't you stop?" Getting no answer, I raised my arm to cover my eyes. I was vaguely transported back to the day I first imprisoned him, only to have him retaliate. It was a fierce, punishing, cathartic assault. That day was for Nathan. What about today? I laughed silently, emptying my mind, too tired to search for an answer. Felt like a long time had passed. George finally seemed ready to finish. He bent down and bit my neck, holding it for over a minute. After his breathing evened out, George lifted his head and said in a low voice, "I didn't." My body was utterly exhausted. I mechanically turned my eyes to him. "Didn't what?" George fell silent again. He got up, backed away, and went straight to the bathroom. When George came out of the shower, I was leaning against the headboard, smoking. He glanced at me and walked into the closet to get a clean set of sheets. After placing them on the bay window, he made a move to pick me up. I pushed his hand away. "Don't bother changing them. You can sleep in the guest room tonight," I said flatly. George stood by the bed, his brow furrowed with irritation. "James, what are you trying to pull now?" I let out a silent laugh and slowly exhaled a puff of smoke before looking up at him. "George, while you were gone these past few days, I've been thinking about something. This thing called love, it's a two-way street. If you keep giving and giving without getting anything back, eventually, it's all going to be used up. No matter how much I liked you back then, after these 3 years, it's pretty much all gone." George's brow furrowed deeply. "What do you mean?" Through the hazy white smoke, I curved my lips into a smile. "You're free." Before leaving for work in the morning, I was surprised to find a sandwich and a glass of milk on the dining table. How rare. But I don't like tomatoes in my sandwiches, and I don't like milk. Nathan, on the other hand, loves them. I snapped a picture and sent it to him. No particular reason. I just wanted to tell him to hurry up. His dear George was still thinking of him. When I got to the office and had just sat down, Liam knocked and came in. "Mr. Wilson, did you eat?" A sudden wave of nausea hit me. I held up a hand to signal him to wait and rushed to the bathroom. I hugged the toilet, vomiting until my vision went black and I could taste blood. When there was nothing left to throw up, I stood up, and a hand steadied my trembling body. Liam handed me a glass of warm water. As I rinsed my mouth, he gently rubbed my back. When I put the cup down, he immediately pulled out a tissue to wipe my mouth. He even wanted to help me wash my hands. The moment our fingertips touched, I stopped him. "Liam, that's enough." He froze, taking a stiff step back. "Sorry, Mr. Wilson," he whispered. The only sound in the bathroom was the running water. I sighed silently, about to say something, but stopped when I looked up. In the mirror, Liam's eyes were fixed on the side of my neck, on a thumbnail-sized red mark at the edge of my shirt collar. I slowly lowered my eyes and continued washing my hands. "Liam, what were you trying to ask me when you came into the office just now?" I turned off the faucet, but still heard no reply. I raised my voice and called out again. "Liam?" The lost puppy finally snapped back to reality, quickly averting his gaze. "I wanted to ask if you had eaten breakfast." Walking out, I immediately saw a multi-layered thermal lunchbox on my desk. Pointed at it. "Did you bring that for me?" "Yeah." "You made it yourself?" "Yeah." The past couple of days were failures, but today's is okay. Seeing that I wasn't saying anything, Liam moved to take it away. I held a hand to stop him. "Leave it." "Huh?" Liam's dazed look made me laugh. I patted his shoulder. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry right now. I'll eat it when I am." It was amazing. The grayness in Liam's eyes instantly brightened. I joked, "Hey, do you have stars hidden in your eyes? Why are they twinkling like that?" Liam blinked. His lips slightly parted as if to say something, but the tips of his ears turned visibly red. Maybe he felt it himself because he said nothing, just turned and scurried away. I worked all morning. The breakfast Liam brought me became my lunch. I opened the lid of the thermal container, taking out each layer. There was yam porridge, steamed black rice cakes, and a savory egg custard with minced meat. In the last layer, there were shelled pistachios. Near the end of the workday, I received a payment reminder from the nursing home. Perfect. The last item on my schedule for today was a trip there. When I got to the parking garage, I saw Liam waiting by my car. "Mr. Wilson, Lee said he has a parent-child activity at his son's school this afternoon and asked me to cover for him. Lee had told me about it at noon. I had told him to just go, but I didn't expect him to find a substitute. I tossed him the car keys. Liam caught them, unlocked the car, and immediately opened the passenger door for me. I stood there, raising an eyebrow slightly. Liam immediately realized his mistake and frantically moved to open the back door. I smiled to myself, walked over, and tapped his hand as he was about to pull the handle. Then I sat in the passenger seat. "All right, just get in the car." There was a flower shop across from the nursing home. Liam asked if I wanted to buy a bouquet. I waved my hand. It would be a waste to buy flowers for someone who could only move their eyes. When I entered the room, the caregiver was there, wiping my father's face. I asked him to step out and pulled a chair over to the bedside. 3 years ago, my father would glare at me with wide, angry eyes. Now he could face me calmly. "Dad, I'm here to pay your bills. Why don't you give me a smile?" His murky eyes were filled with resentment, and he closed them to show his rejection. I smiled and took a cloth to wipe his hands. "What right do you have to hate me? When I was 13, my mother passed away. The day after her burial, my father brought a mother and son home. I had seen the woman before, in my mother's hospital room, where she had repeatedly provoked my mother until her heart stopped. The boy was named Nathan. He was only a year younger than me. Just because I didn't respond when he called me brother, my father kicked me on the spot. That kick left me with a chronic stomach problem. Nathan was frail and got bullied by older kids at school. I watched from the sidelines. When we got home, Nathan, with red eyes, said nothing, but I still got a brutal beating for not protecting my little brother. Incidents like that were countless. Before I turned 16, I could never understand why they could always find so many reasons to hit and curse me. After I turned 16, when they kicked me out of the house, I finally understood. It's called doing whatever it takes to get what you want. I learned my lesson. After I turned 18, I used the trust fund my mother left me to buy a gaming studio. From then on, I navigated dinner parties, negotiating deals and building connections. I gave up my pride, my dignity, and my health, all for the day my company could swallow my father's. 3 years ago, I did it. My father got into a car accident on his way to confront me and ended up like this. I picked up a cloth from the side and wiped his face. As I was wiping, the cloth accidentally covered his mouth and nose. He finally opened his eyes, which gradually filled with fear. "Dad, I dreamed of Mom last night. She asked me if I had taken good care of the flowers in her garden." I slowly raised my hand, pressing the cloth over his mouth and nose, and smiled gently. "What flowers are left in the garden? The day after you brought that woman home, she had people dig up the entire garden. I went to confront her, and she said she was allergic to pollen. And you? You slapped me and made me apologize to her. But later, on her birthday, on every holiday, you would send her flowers. Lots and lots of them." His face turned a purplish red. My smile vanished, and my face hardened. "Dad, do you feel what it's like to be on the verge of suffocation? Back then, that woman knew my mother was mentally unstable, yet she came to provoke her again and again. The pain you're enduring now isn't even a 10,000th of hers." His eyes looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. I tossed the cloth aside and watched him gasp for air. After a long while, I stood up and threw a card on the table. "This is the last time I'm coming to see you. From now on, whether the 3 of you live or die has nothing to do with me." The door to the room had been left ajar. When I pushed it open, I saw Liam's panicked back as he tried to hide. I stood at the door, carefully wiping my fingers with a handkerchief. A few seconds later, a shadow fell over me. "Mr. Wilson, you left your phone in the car. Mr. Armstrong kept calling, so I thought I'd bring it up to you. You heard everything?" "Yes, I was guarding the door for you. No one else will know about what happened today." I paused, tossed the handkerchief into the trash, and looked him in the eye. After 3 seconds, a faint smile appeared on my lips. "Thank you for your trouble." Liam visibly relaxed. "Mr. Wilson, your phone." I took it, put it in my pocket, and started walking. "Liam, I'm planning to move in the next couple of days. Can you help me find a moving company?" I thought for a moment and changed my mind. "Never mind. It's just my stuff. When the time comes." "Just you?" Liam's reaction was a bit strong. His eyes lit up for a second, then dimmed. "You're not living with Mr. Armstrong anymore?" "No." A flicker of hope appeared in Liam's eyes. "Are you single now?" I couldn't help but laugh. Just as I was about to change the subject, my phone rang. The caller ID said George. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "What is it? Why aren't you answering my calls?" I frowned, about to hang up, when his voice came through the phone again. James, I need to tell you something. Go on. You should apologize to Nathan's mother. My hand clenched involuntarily. I scoffed. For what? 3 years ago, you used Nathan's mother to threaten him into breaking up with me. Even though it's in the past, I still hope you'll apologize to them. Are you done? Yeah. When do you get off work? I'll make dinner. I laughed out loud. George, did Nathan ever tell you that he and his mother have been living comfortably all these years on someone else's dime? Putting that aside, even if I did have that woman committed to a mental institution one day, that's what she owes me. And you, George, don't ever call me again. It's over between us. From the nursing home to the parking garage, Liam kept stealing glances at my face. After we got in the car, I instructed him, take me to a hotel first, then you can drive home. After fastening his seatbelt, Liam didn't move. I turned to look at him. Sensing my gaze, Liam turned to meet my eyes. Mr. Wilson, it's not a good idea for you to stay in a hotel alone right now. After a 2-second pause, I teased, what? Afraid I'll do something stupid? No, I'm afraid there'll be no one to take care of you when your stomach hurts. I don't need anyone to take care of me. Just drive. But I want to take care of you. I want to take you home with me. In the silent standoff, I was the first to back down. Liam's gaze was too honest, his eyes shining with something I couldn't reciprocate or bear. I looked away at nothing in particular. Liam, since you know my situation, you should cut your losses. But I don't think liking you is a loss. I closed my eyes. 2 words popped into my head. Stubborn mule. Liam, if you don't listen to me now, you'll suffer a lot later. A laugh sounded by my ear. You're thinking about my future? Mr. Wilson, I think I've figured you out. You just don't want to owe anyone anything. Even people who've hurt you, you'll settle the score with them one by one, right? I turned and frowned at him. Liam's smile didn't waver. But Mr. Wilson, everything I'm doing is because I want to. Even if you can't give me anything in return, you don't owe me anything. You don't need to feel burdened. My face hardened. Are you an idiot? Liam gave me a bright smile. I'm not an idiot. I know what I'm doing, and I can anticipate the outcome. Before, I could only stand by and watch. But if you make me just watch now, I'll go crazy. I shot him a sideways glance. What happens when you go crazy? Liam shrugged. I don't know, but I'm sure you wouldn't have the heart to see me go crazy. Mr. Wilson, don't worry about what I'm thinking. Just think of me as a friend or a subordinate trying to win your favor. Okay. I didn't speak. Liam unbuckled his seatbelt, leaned closer, and gently shook my arm. Please. I gave him a helpless look. Do you know what you look like right now? I don't. But I know you've softened up, Liam said, pointing at my eyes from a distance. I saw it just now. Your expression, it was gentle for a second. After a long silence, I lowered my eyes. Liam. Yeah. Just as friends. Okay? Liam nodded obediently. Okay. The car started to move slowly. Liam spoke as if making small talk. Mr. Wilson, did you notice that in our whole conversation just now, I haven't been using the formal you? I guess you're right. Want to know why? Why? Because it's after work hours. I let out a small laugh. Then why are you still calling me Mr. Wilson? Liam glanced at me, his tone rising at the end. That's different. Even after hours, you're still my boss. I smiled, relaxing and closing my eyes. After work, don't call me Mr. Wilson. Just use my name. James? Or, can I call you by your first name? Whatever you want. Liam's voice was filled with a smile. James? Yeah. Liam's home was clean and bright. The balcony was filled with green plants. Liam had carefully attached a small tag to each plant. On the flower stand was a leather-bound notebook, recording the watering and fertilizing schedule for each plant. I squatted in front of a thriving orchid and couldn't help but smile. Liam had brought many orchids to my office, always saying he just happened to find a flower shop having a sale. A ringing phone pulled me back to the present. I glanced at it. George again. I hung up and blocked his number. When I returned to the living room, Liam brought me a glass of warm water and then hurried back to the kitchen. I wanted to go in and help, but as I got closer, I vaguely heard him on the phone. Haven't eaten yet. I'm making it now. But I'm making dinner for 2 tonight. Yeah. It's him. Quick. Congratulate me. I finally brought him home. No, please don't come over. I'm afraid you'll scare him away. By the way, Mom, can you ask Maria to come help me out for a couple of days? Or maybe just get me a meal plan from her. Nutritious and easy to digest. Of course, it has to taste good too. I know I'm learning, aren't I? That's all for now. Say hi to Dad for me. Bye. Liam hung up and started cooking. I stood at the doorway, thought for a moment, and decided not to go in. An hour later, Liam called me for dinner. 3 dishes and a soup. Scrambled eggs with chives, blanched shrimp, stir-fried lettuce, and winter melon meatball soup. After I had tasted each dish, he asked, "Is it good, James?" Yeah. I quietly ate my food. After a while, I heard him ask again, "Is your stomach bothering you?" I paused, realizing my expression might have been too serious, and then smiled. "No, hurry up and eat." After dinner, Liam took the initiative. "James, is there something you want to say to me?" After a moment of deliberation, I asked, "Liam, how do you usually treat your friends?" "Depends on which kind you're asking about. I have fair weather friends, regular friends, and good friends." I got serious. "So which category do you put me in?" "The 4th category, I guess." "What?" Liam looked at me steadily, a smile slowly blooming on his face. "A category that was just created today." I frowned, my lips parting to speak, but Liam popped a piece of hawthorn cake into my mouth, his smile growing even wider. "So, James, this is my first time having a friend like you. Please bear with me if I don't do a good job." That little rascal. My stomach hurt for a long time last night. I only managed to fall asleep just before dawn. So when Liam came knocking on my door in the morning, I didn't hear him at all. He got so anxious that he just opened the door and rushed in. When he saw my pale face, he fell silent. He knelt by the bed, his hand trembling as he reached out to check if I was breathing. I reached out from under the covers, grabbed his hand, and pushed it away before slowly opening my eyes. Oh no, I almost made the kid cry. His eyes were already red. My mind was still a bit foggy. Without thinking, I raised my hand to his face, my thumb gently brushing under his eye.
"I'm alive."
"Don't cry." Liam immediately held back his tears, but his face started to turn red. Damn it, now I've made him shy. I sighed helplessly, pulling my hand back to cover my eyes. "Go out for a bit." "I'll be up soon," I said languidly. Because of this, we were almost late for work. We hit traffic on the way, and by the time we got to the company parking lot, we were already 20 minutes late. "Mr. Wilson, are you going to dock my pay?" Liam's serious expression made me laugh. I unbuckled my seatbelt and said, "Sure, have HR dock my pay too." The moment I got out of the car, my smile vanished. George emerged from behind another car, his face dark, his eyes bloodshot. "Mr. Wilson, you..." The moment Liam saw George, he fell silent. With a slam of the car door, he ran in front of me, completely blocking me from view. "James, I don't know why you two broke up, but you made it clear it was over. It's his fault for showing up to corner you like this. Just give the word, and I'll beat him up for you." Liam was already in a fighting stance. I gently pulled at his half-raised arm, but it didn't budge. Helpless, I reached up and squeezed the back of his neck. "James, yeah, you go on up. But he looks dangerous." I smiled. "If he starts something, I'll fight back." "Don't worry. You go upstairs first. Be good." "Okay." Liam reluctantly left, looking back every 3 steps. After watching him get on the elevator, I turned to George. "What do you want? Why didn't you answer my calls?" "Why should I answer your calls? You were with your assistant last night? What's it to you?" "James, I waited for you all night." I sneered. "And? Did I ask you to wait? A PhD can't understand what it's over means?" George had lost all his previous calm and composure. His chest heaved as he took a heavy step forward. "James, why do you get to say when it's over?" "Oh? So what do you want? I was the one clinging to you in the first place. Now that I'm giving you your freedom, you should be happy." "No, that's not it. George was so agitated he was incoherent. That's not it at all. I'm not talking about freedom. This is too sudden, James. Why are you suddenly like this? I frowned in disbelief. Sudden? George, I waited for you for 3 days. Or maybe, I've been waiting for you for 3 years. George's serious expression flickered with a moment of confusion. I didn't want to say any more. I turned to leave, but he suddenly grabbed my arm. George took a few deep breaths and said with difficulty, James, I can explain. Nothing happened between me and him those 3 days. Listen to me. What does that have to do with me? I pulled his hand away and laughed lightly. George, I made it very clear that night. I have no feelings for you anymore. Even sleeping with you that night, I felt nothing. So I'm absolutely sure. I really, truly don't love you anymore. The color drained from George's face, and his Adam's apple bobbed several times. James, you can't do this. You were the one who forced me. Yes, I forced you back then. But I've given you your freedom now, haven't I? So why are you coming back to me saying all these strange things? George's face was tense, and he said nothing. I raised an eyebrow and nodded. I get it. You want compensation, right? Fine. The apartment you're living in now is worth $5 million. Is yours? James. A roar echoed in the air. I looked at him calmly. If you don't want money, what do you want? After a 2-second silence, I raised an eyebrow. Don't tell me you still want me to love you? George's pupils constricted violently, his expression as if he'd been stung by a scorpion. I laughed, full of scorn. I waved my hand and turned to leave. The apartment is yours. Consider it compensation for your emotional distress. From now on, we owe each other nothing. The moment I sat down in my office, Liam burst in like a whirlwind. He grabbed my shoulders, pulled me up from my leather chair, and started patting me down. What are you doing? His not-so-gentle touch traveled all the way down to my ankles and back up again, not even sparing the palms and backs of my hands. Finally, Liam let out a long sigh. Thank God you're okay. I laughed helplessly. You rushed in here in such a panic just for this? Yeah. You're too good at hiding your pain. Even though you look fine, I was still worried. As he spoke, he placed his warm palm on my stomach. What about here? Does it hurt? I shook my head slightly. His hand moved to my heart. What about here? Liam looked at me steadily, his eyes as clear as a pristine spring. In a single breath, I understood what he was asking. It doesn't hurt. It's just empty. I forced a smile, pushed his hand away, and sat back down. Stop overthinking things. Get back to work. Liam hung his head and said, Oh, but didn't move. I glanced at him. Something else? Yes. Spit it out. Liam cleared his throat and began slowly. Mr. Wilson, I ordered some clothes and shoes for you last night. I had them scheduled for delivery to my place at 7 tonight. Also, a woman is coming to my place to cook tonight. She's a really good cook. Liam's voice got quieter and quieter. I raised an eyebrow. So are you coming home with me tonight? I put down the file in my hand, looked at him, and asked with a half smile, You want to support me? Liam shook his head. No, it's just friends taking care of each other. Friends. I mulled over the word, leaned back in my chair, and asked with a blank expression, How long do you plan on taking care of me? Until the day you don't need me anymore. Will you cry on that day? No. But you cried this morning. Liam, you have eyes that can't lie. After a moment of eye contact, Liam lowered his gaze, his thick lashes hiding his bright pupils. After a long silence, he took a shallow breath, a bitter smile touching his lips. James, I know I can't fool you, but if I really listened to you and stayed away from you, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. In fact, I wouldn't just cry on that day. If you made me just watch you every day without being able to do anything, I'd cry then too. I constantly think about you. I'd cry thinking about you not eating. I'd cry thinking about you not being able to sleep. I'd cry thinking about you being in pain with no one by your side. I cried this morning because I regretted not meeting you before he did. I still have so much I want to tell you. I haven't traveled with you. I haven't introduced you to my family. There are so many things I haven't done with you. James, I'm not asking for a specific outcome. I just want, For every day I have now to be by your side, and you won't cry if you're by my side? Liam shot his head up. He had been so engrossed in his speech that he hadn't noticed I had walked right up to him. James. Yeah. Liam took my hand that was wiping his tears, his red-rimmed eyes glistening, his dark pupils wet and bright. James, you've gone soft on me again. Haven't you? I didn't speak. After a 2-second silence, I looked away and raised my other hand to wipe the tear from his chin. Liam suddenly laughed, wrapping his arms around me, his chin resting on my shoulder, his heartbeat thudding against my chest. James, I'm so happy. I raised my hand, then let it fall, and whispered back, I know. I stayed at Liam's place for a week. I actually started to feel a sense of leisure. My workload was decreasing every day. Half of it was handed over to the company's second-in-command, Monica, and the other half to Liam. I was surprised to find that Liam's analytical and decision-making skills were excellent. I had only thought of him as a good assistant before, but now I think he could be a good boss too. James, I'm a little tired. Liam looked up from a large pile of documents, his eyes no longer sparkling. I poured him some tea and pushed the cup towards him. Did you learn everything I taught you today? Liam grabbed the cup, leaned back in his chair, and sighed as he drank. I learned it. Turns out you bosses have so much to worry about every day. It's not easy. I glanced at him, hinting, from the sound of it, you don't want to be a boss? Then who's going to inherit your family's company? Liam looked at me and waved his hand. My older brother and sister-in-law are holding down the fort at home, and my dad hasn't retired yet. The only place the company needs me is in the RD department. Didn't expect that, did you, James? I've been secretly moonlighting behind your back. I remember your major was software engineering. A company in that field with the family name White. Is your father Bill White? Liam's eyes lit up for a moment. You know him? I nodded. Yeah, he's a very famous entrepreneur. Liam perked up. My dad's name is Bill White. My brother is Ethan. My mom is Laura. My sister-in-law is Sophie, and I have grandparents on both sides, and they all know about you. I looked at him, amused. Know what about me? Liam's gaze flickered, and he whispered, that I like you, of course. After a moment of silence, I asked softly, they don't object? Liam frowned. Of course not. They like you too. My brother has always admired you. My parents were asking me yesterday when I was going to bring you home for dinner. Oh, and those clothes I secretly bought for you, my sister-in-law helped pick out half of them. Listening to him, I found myself zoning out. Liam suddenly ran over, spun my chair around, and knelt down. James, what's wrong? Liam's slightly anxious voice brought me back. I smiled. Nothing. Just suddenly receiving so much affection. I'm not used to it. Liam rested his hands on my knees, his expression turning a little sad. James, am I putting pressure on you? I couldn't help but laugh. I pulled him up by the arm. What are you thinking? Go pack up. Time to get off work. Liam's moods came and went quickly. In no time, he was back to being a cheerful puppy. On the way home, he dragged me to the supermarket. As we were walking to the parking lot after paying, he suddenly leaned in close to my ear. James, I think someone's following us. I stopped and looked around, but didn't see anyone suspicious. After dinner, Liam took me for a walk in a nearby park. Before long, I also sensed something was off. Someone was definitely following us. Liam and I exchanged a look. I had a guess. James, do you think it's him? I'm not sure. I had already asked my lawyer to handle the transfer of the apartment I promised George. He had no reason to come looking for me. I tugged on Liam's sleeve. Let's go. Let's walk a little longer. But we hadn't gone far when a sharp pain twisted in my stomach. I froze, unable to stop myself from frowning. Liam looked down at me, then immediately crouched down, lifted me onto his back, and started walking back. Felt like a hand was tearing at my insides. I lay weakly on his back. The warmth from his body made the cold, sticky gaze on my back feel even more pronounced. In a daze, I thought I heard someone call my name, James. The painkillers were becoming less and less effective. Liam stayed up with me for most of the night. The next morning, Liam knelt by my bed and asked, James, Can I wear sunglasses to work today? I opened my eyes, took a moment to process, and then took the sunglasses off his face. For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Liam's beautiful puppy dog eyes were swollen like a sad cartoon frog. I sighed silently, turning my hand over to gently touch them. Didn't you say you wouldn't cry if you were by my side? Liam grabbed my hand and lowered his head, his voice muffled. I feel so useless. Liam. Yeah. Liam shot his head up, curved my lips. Can I call you that? Liam looked at me, nodding dumbly. I sat up in bed and put the sunglasses back on his face. Don't talk yourself down. You're very capable both as my assistant and as my friend. I'm very satisfied. Go to the office this morning and hand things over to Monica. In the afternoon, submit a leave request through the system. I'll approve it and then come back and rest. Okay? Okay. After Liam left, I tidied up and called my lawyer, Mr. Chun. He's been with me for almost 10 years and is one of my most trusted people. I spent the morning going over my assets. Some important documents were still in the apartment I had promised to George. Mr. Chun, has the new deed been processed? Mr. Chun nodded. I just got it yesterday. It's at the office. Should I deliver it to Mr. Armstrong this afternoon? No, just give it to Liam when you get back to the office and have him bring it to me. Okay, Mr. Wilson. It was almost 6 in the afternoon when Liam returned. The moment he walked in, he came right up to me and made me look at his eyes. Are they back to normal, James? I cupped his face, looking from side to side. Why do I feel like you've gotten younger? Liam grinned. Of course. To get the swelling down quickly, I had my sister-in-law take me to a salon and got a facial. Smug little puppy. The moment I turned, Liam wrapped his arms around me from behind, not letting me go. James, what were you just muttering? I took the property deed from his hand and said without changing my expression, I was complimenting you. Now let go. I have to go out for a bit. Don't wait for me for dinner. But Liam didn't listen. He snatched the car keys and strode ahead of me. I'll take you. I told Liam to wait for me downstairs. Upstairs, I stood at the door for a full minute before ringing the doorbell. It rang 3 times with no answer. After a moment's hesitation, I tried the fingerprint lock. The door opened. The room was dim, the layout unchanged. Even the spot where I kept my slippers was the same. But as soon as I stepped inside, I was hit by the strong smell of alcohol. I reached out and turned on the light. Taking 2 steps in, I saw George sitting slumped against the liquor cabinet. Empty bottles were scattered around him. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot. There was no trace of his former gentle, refined self. He looked up at me and said hoarsely, "You're back." I frowned. At this time of day, George should have just gotten off work. You didn't go to work today? The words slipped out before I could stop them. I shouldn't have asked. No, I've been waiting for you. I stopped in my tracks, ignored him, and walked straight to the study. My things were in the safe. I found a folder, put them inside, and when I came out, I saw George blocking the doorway. My face hardened. Excuse me. George didn't move, his dark gaze slowly roving over me. You've lost weight. I looked away and repeated coldly, excuse me. George ignored me, even taking another step forward. James, I know how you felt during those 3 days. It was agonizing, hopeless, painful. Listening to his obsessive muttering, a wave of irritation rose in me. My stomach started to cramp again, the pain coming on fiercely. I took a shallow breath and tried to control my temper. I left the deed on the table for you. If you're drunk, go to sleep. Don't block. James. George suddenly snapped, his face contorting in pain. I don't want any deed, I don't want compensation, I don't want any of that stuff. My patience ran out as the pain intensified. I took a deep breath and tried to move around him. If you don't want it, throw it away. My arm was suddenly grabbed with force. George stared at me, enunciating each word. James, I don't want anything. I just want you to come back. I closed my eyes, digging my fingernails into my palms to stay calm. George, I'm not in the mood for your jokes right now. I'm not joking. George's shout startled me. His grip so tight it felt like he was going to crush my arm. James, come back. Let's talk properly. If there's a misunderstanding, we can clear it up. Talk about what? What is there for us to talk about? The pain and emotion peaked, and I screamed, "It's over. Don't you understand? I don't love you anymore, George. It's over. Don't love me?" George slowly chewed on those words, a strange smile in his eyes. "James, we were together for 3 years. How can you just say you don't love me anymore? Is it because of that Liam, right?" I stared at him, a mixture of shock and anger. "Bullshit." George was now like a deranged madman, a twisted smile on his face. I struggled to pull my arm free, but he grabbed both my wrists. "James, you keep saying you have no feelings for me. Then who do you have feelings for? For Liam? You found a new option, so you're kicking me out, is that it?" "But I don't agree. I don't agree." George suddenly lurched forward, dragging me inside. "What are you doing?" "George." My vision blurred as George threw me onto the sofa, his knees pinning my legs apart as he pressed down on me. "What am I doing? You said you have no feeling, right? Then let's find that feeling again. I was gone for 3 days, you were gone for 10. We're even. From now on, neither of us will mention it. Will, George." I slapped him with all my might. "Get a fucking grip." George paused for a second, slowly turning his head back, his lower body still pinning me down. He grabbed the front of my shirt. I am perfectly lucid. With a rip, the buttons of my shirt scattered on the floor. The sound of the buttons hitting the floor hammered against my eardrums. For a moment, I seemed to have lost the ability to speak. A pair of hands roamed freely over my body. A warm, wet sensation landed on my neck, teeth sinking into my skin, like a venomous snake injecting cold poison. The pain drained all my strength, while anger assaulted my nerves. In that moment, I actually felt like I was on the verge of a breakdown. Those hands moved to my lower body. My stomach cramped violently, like 1,000 steel needles piercing me over and over. I desperately wanted to curl up, but George held me down, pressing on me relentlessly. Even my breath seemed to taste of blood. Without warning, something surged up from my esophagus. I quickly covered my mouth. In an instant, a metallic sweetness filled my throat, rushing to get out. Bright red blood seeped through my fingers. It streamed down the back of my hand. Weakly, I tried to push George away, forcing the words from my throat. "Get off." The smell of blood filled the air. George paused, looked up, and stared at me, his face a complete blank. "Get." Bang! The door was violently thrown open. I slowly turned my head towards the entrance. The sight before him shocked Liam so much he couldn't make a sound. The moment our eyes met, he rushed over, yanked George off me and threw him to the floor, then reached for me with trembling hands. "James, you said you were just coming up to get something. How did it turn into this?" "I'm sorry, James, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you come up alone." Tears streamed down Liam's face. I felt a sense of urgency, wanting to say something to comfort him. The moment I opened my mouth, a gush of blood poured out. It stained his white shirt. I frantically tried to wipe it away, but I only made it worse. I quickly curled my fingers, pulling my hand back, gasping for breath. Blood kept spilling from my mouth. I couldn't stop it. I turned my face away, struggling to move, but Liam pulled me into a tight embrace, his steady arms trembling uncontrollably. "James, it's me, Liam, don't hide." "Okay." A hot tear rolled down his chin and landed on my forehead. Then a second, and a third, washing away the blood on my face. I almost forgot. Liam wouldn't think I was dirty. I stopped moving. I leaned weakly against his chest, clutching his sleeve, and mumbled, "Go, Liam, go." George scrambled up from the floor, his eyes empty, and mechanically tried to follow. "Get the hell away." Liam kicked George hard. "You'd better get on your fucking knees and pray he'll be okay." George still followed them to the hospital. He stood outside the emergency room like a zombie. He would glance at Liam from time to time. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He walked over numbly and asked the question, "James, what's wrong with him?" Liam was half covered in blood. The sight of George's face sent a surge of rage to his head. He grabbed his collar and raised his fist, but in the next second, he remembered James was on the operating table, his life hanging in the balance. In that instant, the pain in his heart was suffocating. He clenched his jaw, lowered his fist, and shoved George away, his voice tight. "You should have fucking thought about that phone call he made to you." George's numb brain started to turn, and a clear, cold voice grew louder, echoing in his mind. "George, I've been diagnosed with cancer." The doctor said. What did the doctor say? He hadn't even let him finish before letting Nathan interrupt. George felt as if a bullet had struck him between the eyes. His face turned ashen, and he collapsed to his knees as if his spine had been removed. Thinking about what he had done to James tonight, he slapped himself hard across the face. The last 3 years flooded back to him like a tidal wave. He had resented James for forcefully interfering in his relationship, but James had silently endured all his anger and outbursts. In these 3 years, James had never been anything but good to him. The red light of the in-surgery sign was blinding. It was only in this moment that George had to admit that while he clung to James's past mistakes, he had also arrogantly enjoyed his submission. He had grown accustomed to James's sacrificial love. He wanted James to love him fiercely forever. So he deliberately used the silent treatment to control him, shamefully used Nathan to test him, and despicably manipulated his emotions to suppress him. It turned out he was the one who would do whatever it takes. The in-surgery light went out. The doors to the operating room opened from the inside. Medical staff pushed the unconscious James out and took him to the ICU. Liam hurriedly followed. He didn't even notice the ghost like George trailing behind him. Just as the medical staff were leaving the room, Liam's older brother arrived with the whole family. Liam let out half a sigh of relief, stepping aside to let them in, while he followed the head physician to his office. The 20-minute conversation sent Liam's heart plummeting to the depths. He returned, fraught with worry, and saw George standing at the door. His anger flared, and he rushed forward to push him away. "What are you still doing here?" Liam was like a wolf on high alert, his gaze menacing, his fists clenched so tight they cracked. But George was oblivious, speaking slowly. "I want to go in and see him." "See him? What right do you have to see him now?" George stared straight at the small glass window on the hospital room door and answered irrelevantly, "I love him." Those 3 words completely enraged Liam. He grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to the stairwell. "Say that again, I dare you." George lifted his eyelids, his gaze as calm as still water. "I love him." The moment the words left his mouth, Liam didn't hesitate to punch him in the face, his voice trembling with anger. "You love him? When he was giving you his whole heart, why didn't you say you loved him? When he was healthy, why didn't you say you loved him? When he called you from the hospital, why the fuck didn't you say you loved him?" With each question, Liam landed another heavy punch, his eyes red with fury, his heart filled with a mixture of grief and indignation, completely disregarding George's well-being. "Now that he's sick, you know you love him? Now that he doesn't want you, you know you love him? What fucking right do you have to say you love him?" George had been hanging his arms limply like a dead man, letting him hit him. But hearing the word right seemed to strike a nerve. He suddenly fought back, punching Liam in the corner of his mouth. "What fucking right do you have? If you knew he was sick, why didn't you take him for treatment? What right do you have to talk about love?" Liam almost laughed at the absurd accusation. He pushed his tongue against the cut inside his cheek and kicked the back of George's knee again. "You think I didn't want to? Do you have any idea how painful the treatment is? Without the support of family and friends, it's just a hopeless ordeal. The cure rate is less than 30%. It's highly likely that all that suffering would be for nothing. He can tolerate a lot of pain, but he never said he wasn't afraid of it. He placed what little trust and reliance he had left in you, and what did you do? You fucking let someone else curse him to death. And that someone else your first love, right? Her mother drove James's mother to her death. And what did you do? You told James to apologize to her mother." George, who had been leaning against the wall for support after being kicked by Liam, completely lost his footing at this. He collapsed to the ground. Tears fell silently to the floor. He thought he really had no right to say those 3 words. The only thing he could say was, "I'm sorry." I woke up the next evening. When I opened my eyes, I saw a beautiful woman. Her features were familiar, and her smile even more so. Curved my lips.
Hello, Mom.
Hello to you too, sweetheart. Sweetheart. It had been almost 20 years since anyone had called me that. In a daze, the woman, Laura, had already gone to the balcony, patted Liam, who had just hung up the phone, and asked softly, "What did your uncle say?" Liam was turned to the side, his brow slightly furrowed. "Uncle said it's difficult, and he has to see him in person." Laura patted his arm comfortingly. "Go on in. He's awake." Liam immediately turned his head, and his face broke into a smile the moment our eyes met. "Mom, you can go home. I've got this." Laura looked at me, pointed to the thermal container on the bedside table, made a gesture for drinking soup, and then a wave goodbye. Just as I was about to sit up, Liam was already by the bed, kneeling down, his hand reaching under the covers to hold mine. "James, are you uncomfortable anywhere right now?" I shook my head, my eyes falling on the corner of his mouth. "Did you get into a fight?" Liam was silent for a second before admitting frankly, "Yeah, in the stairwell." I offered to pay his medical bills, but he didn't take it. I smiled faintly and changed the subject. "My condition, what did the doctor say?" "The doctor said you vomited blood this time mainly because you were provoked." "Soon." "Liam, you know that's not what I'm asking." Liam lowered his head slightly, his eyelashes trembling, his Adam's apple bobbing a couple of times before he could speak. "The doctor said, it's already started to spread. Without treatment, at most 3 months. I squeezed Liam's hand and smiled. 3 months. That's a long time. A long silence. Liam looked up, his voice choked with emotion. "James, are you sure?" I reached out and gently wiped the tear from the corner of his eye. "Yeah. I don't want to gamble anymore." On the second day of my hospital stay, the company's senior executives came to visit one by one. I only told Monica the truth. The usually decisive and stern woman's eyes actually turned red. I made an audacious request. "Monica, Liam will become the company's largest shareholder in the future, but he doesn't like to worry about things. He'll most likely be a hands-off owner. I'll have to trouble you to take care of the company's affairs." After giving my instructions, I handed her a card I had prepared in advance. A small token of my appreciation. "Thank you for your hard work." Monica held her bag in one hand and kept the other behind her back, showing no intention of taking it. "Don't worry, Mr. Wilson. You trained me. I know what to do." With that, she wiped her eyes and walked away without looking back. I sighed silently and handed the card to Mr. Chun, who was standing beside me. "Find a chance to give it to her." "Yes, Mr. Wilson." On the third day, I received a call from an unknown number. Recognizing Nathan's voice, I hung up immediately. But in the afternoon, he appeared at the door of my hospital room. He couldn't get in because George, who was standing guard at the door, blocked him. George had been guarding my door day and night since I woke up. The two seemed to be arguing. As the argument got louder, I asked Liam to let Nathan in. He looked like a ghost of his former self, like he was on drugs. "You have 2 minutes." Nathan stuck his neck out. "You're not going to take care of Dad anymore?" I said with a blank expression. If I remember correctly, I gave him a card with $150,000 on it. "What? Did you and your mother spend it all already?" Nathan's eyes darted around. "What card?" "I never saw it." After a 2-second silence, I let out a light laugh. "Fine, you didn't see it. Time's up. Get out." "James, you can't take that money to the grave with you. You might as well give it to someone who can use it." Liam suddenly moved, but I raised a hand to stop him and said slowly, "Someone who can use it? What use are you? You needed $3 million for your study abroad, and I gave it to you. What did you do with it? You changed partners every 2 months. Did you party too hard? Do you dare tell the man outside the real reason you came back?" Nathan's pupils constricted. I smiled gently. "I can't take that money to the grave, but I can send you to rehab. Want to try?" Nathan's face turned pale in an instant, his eyes frantic. He blustered, "James, don't you fucking scare me. You'll get what's coming to you." Before he could finish, George rushed in and dragged him out. Half an hour later, Liam went out to check and gave me a look from the doorway. I nodded. Tell him to leave too. 2 minutes later, Liam came back in and knelt by the bed. James, he won't leave. If he won't leave, then fine. Liam was silent for 2 seconds, then continued, he also asked me to give you a message. What? He said he's sorry. I glanced at the door, then looked away and said softly, I know. On the last day of my hospital stay, I spent the morning organizing all my work and had Liam take it to the company for a handover with Monica. In the afternoon, while he was gone, I called for Mr. Chun to write my will. Mr. Chun handed me the asset list to look over. I laughed to myself. So I had earned this much in my short life. Mr. Wilson, what are your wishes? I closed the list and said calmly, after I die, all my assets will be given to Liam White. I was discharged the next day. I saw George, who had been waiting outside the door. The bruises on his face hadn't faded. We looked at each other, speechless. He followed us, always keeping a distance of 5 steps. He followed us to the parking lot and watched me get into the car. The window was halfway down. After a moment's hesitation, I looked out. George's face was already streaked with tears. He took a stiff step forward, his lips parting to say I, but then he broke down sobbing. A few seconds later, he staggered back a step, looked at me with his blurry eyes, and forced out the words, James, goodbye. I gave a slight nod. Goodbye. This was how it was supposed to end between us. Liam said he wanted to take me to a place with beautiful mountains and clear water. After a 3-hour drive, we arrived. A farmhouse built on a mountainside. It was his grandparents' home. After lunch, Liam showed me around. Standing on a hilltop, he swept his arm across the landscape and declared grandly, This entire tea mountain belongs to our family. I laughed and asked him where the clear water was. He led me back, out the back door of the courtyard, and pointed to a fish pond. There. I think it's pretty clear. I laughed out loud and raised an eyebrow. Got any fishing rods? A cunning glint appeared in Liam's sparkling eyes. My grandpa has some in his room. I'll go steal a $20,000 one for you. He actually stole the fishing rod. His grandfather brought it over himself. Unfortunately, it started to rain shortly after we started fishing. We had to go back to the front yard and sit under the eaves to enjoy the rain. Liam said he was going to his room to get me a jacket. Just as he left, his grandmother came towards me, carrying a small table in one hand and a large plate of fried fish in the other. A moment later, she brought over fried meatballs and fried lotus root pockets. As she was bringing the 4th plate of snacks, she ran right into Liam coming down the wooden stairs. Liam immediately frowned, put his arm around his grandmother's shoulder, and turned her around. Grandma, his stomach is weak. Don't let him eat these oily things. Then what can he eat? His grandmother said, anxiously elbowing Liam. He's so thin, it breaks my heart to see. He ate so little for lunch, what can he eat? I'll go make him something else. Oh, no need. Eating too much will just make him uncomfortable. When he's better, you can make him 8 meals a day. Okay? His grandmother elbowed him again. I looked down and smiled, picking up a small crispy fish and putting it in my mouth, chewing slowly. So fragrant. Just as I picked up a second one, a jacket was draped over my shoulders. Liam stood behind me, leaned over, and took the small fish from my hand with his mouth. I shot him a sideways glance. If you want some, get your own. Liam laughed and took out a tissue to wipe my hands. Didn't you just say your stomach was hurting when we were fishing? And now you're eating? Yeah, it's just too fragrant. I want to eat it even if it hurts. Otherwise, I might not get to eat it later. Liam's bedroom was surprisingly cozy. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him expertly change the duvet cover. Are you sure you want me to sleep in the same bed with you? Liam shook out the duvet. Yeah, you're not a guest. Of course you have to sleep in my room. Besides, if you're not feeling well at night, I'll know right away. And then what? Liam turned around and smiled brightly. Then I can rub your stomach for you. Grandma told me. She also gave me a hot water bottle. I smiled but didn't say anything. After showering and getting into bed, Liam had already placed the filled hot water bottle between us. He even took my hand and placed it on top to test the temperature. James, is it warm?
Yeah.
But actually, the hand on top of mine was warmer. I'm used to sleeping on my side. When I woke up naturally in the morning, I found an arm draped over my waist. I was completely enveloped in Liam's embrace. As I became fully awake, I noticed a distinct heat against my lower back. 1 second I was thinking how well the hot water bottle retained heat, and the next I realized something was wrong. A hot water bottle couldn't be this hard. I kept my eyes closed and smiled helplessly. A moment later, I felt someone sniffing at the back of my neck. My lower back was also being nudged. On the third nudge, the person behind me suddenly stiffened. The next second, Liam shot out of bed and rushed into the bathroom. I waited until I heard the bathroom door open before sitting up. James, you're not going to sleep a little longer? Liam's face was still a bit red. I lowered my eyes and smiled faintly. No, I'm up. The heat woke me. Then, I'll go downstairs and make you breakfast. And with that, he ran off. When I looked up, I only managed to catch a glimpse of the tip of his ear, which was red as a beet. First thing in the morning, I'd acquired a flustered puppy. Time passes quietly in the mountains. One day I'd be picking tea with his grandmother, the next I'd be fishing with his grandfather, and the day after that I'd be exploring nearby sites with Liam. Before I knew it, half a month had passed. If it weren't for suddenly vomiting blood this morning, I would have almost forgotten that I only had 2 or 3 months left. When Liam came upstairs to call me for breakfast, I had just finished cleaning the sink. Looking at Liam in the mirror, I tried to reason with him softly. Can I skip breakfast this morning? Liam looked away, took a dry towel to wipe my hands, and said in a muffled voice, "Okay, you don't have to eat." After leaving the bathroom, Liam said he was going downstairs to get something. I nodded and curled up on the sofa to wait for him. In a daze, I heard the door open. When I opened my eyes, I saw Liam kneeling in front of me. His eyes were red, as expected. His nose was red too. I looked away and asked softly, "What did you get from downstairs?" Liam raised an eyebrow and smiled. "I got you some light reading." With that, he pulled out a brown leather notebook from behind his back. I had my mom mail it. It just arrived this morning. I took it, gently opened the cover, and asked with a smile, "What's it about?" Liam pursed his lips, looking a little embarrassed. He stood up, took a thin blanket from the side and covered me with it, muttering, "See for yourself." The first page had a single sentence. "I hate writing, but I love the name James. I love it a lot." Below that sentence were many, many James. And James himself was pointing his finger, counting them one by one, page after page. A total of 1,097. I turned another page and the main text began. Number 1. Today was a good day. Mr. Wilson and his team came to our university for a recruitment talk. But he only made a brief appearance on stage before coming down to the audience. He ended up sitting right next to me. God, he smells so good, like a subtle tea fragrance soaked in morning mist. Mr. Wilson looked a little tired. The dark circles under his eyes were so obvious on his fair skin. Less than 5 minutes later, Mr. Wilson closed his eyes. Did he fall asleep? Okay. After another 5 minutes of restraint, I started openly staring at him. Mr. Wilson's eyes are truly exquisite, like they were drawn with a fine brush, handsome without losing their sharpness. His lashes are thick and long, and with those little crescent moon eye bags, they give him a touch of gentleness. Below that is a high-bridged nose, and further down are lips that look very kissable. I hereby declare, the person who is absolutely perfect for me has appeared. Number 2. After that day, I decided to follow Mr. Wilson. I wanted to be his assistant, but he already had one. I'm very sorry, but I have to use some tricks. I secretly contacted Mr. Wilson's assistant, Ms. Lin. After discussing it with my brother, I offered her a higher salary to come work for our family's company and gave her a generous sum to keep quiet. Everything went very smoothly. Ms. Lin resigned soon after, so I sent my resume to Mr. Wilson's company, aiming straight for the executive assistant position. After 3 rounds of interviews and a final one with Mr. Wilson himself, I got the job. I got it. Number 3. Mr. Wilson is so good at his job. Going out for negotiations with him is awesome. Seriously, I'd be willing to pay to have this job. My dad asked if I was coming back. I said no. I've already found my boss. I'll follow him for life. P.S. My sister-in-law saw my social media feed and said I was too happy at work, which got back to my dad and turned into me being too idle. So now I have to finish the RD department's work too. It's fine, I get it, putting me to good use. Number 4. I'm screwed. I found out Mr. Wilson is seeing someone. His lips are chapped or cut every few days. Annoyed. Jealous. Wanna go crazy.
Número 5.
I can't take it anymore. Today, I secretly followed Mr. Wilson. Turns out, the guy with Mr. Wilson looks pretty decent. But he gave Mr. Wilson a look. As expected, the favored one has nothing to fear. Heartbroken. But I don't want to leave. In this position, at least I can be with Mr. Wilson during the day. Stay, Liam? Okay.
Número 6.
After long-term observation, I found that Mr. Wilson doesn't seem very happy in his relationship. I followed Mr. Wilson again. Damn, this time I saw Mr. Wilson arguing with that guy. They almost came to blows. I held back and finally managed not to rush in. Couldn't sleep that night. The more I thought about it, the more something felt wrong. Mr. Wilson's relationship with that guy isn't normal. But what can I do? I don't even have the right to ask. Number 7. Mr. Wilson is unhappy more and more often. I'm so anxious. The only thing I can do is to help him as much as possible when we're working together during the day. Mr. Wilson will smile at me. He looks so good when he smiles. Super good. PPS. I wish Mr. Wilson would smile at me every day. Mr. Wilson will praise my work ability and my attention to detail. Sometimes when he goes on business trips without me, he'll even bring me back a gift. Forget it. It's not bad just being by his side like this. Number 8. I'm not resigned to it. Because Mr. Wilson isn't happy. Daily question. When will Mr. Wilson dump that guy? Number 9. My world has collapsed. Mr. Wilson has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. What can I do for him? Heartache. Insomnia. Number 10. I called my uncle. He said it's difficult. My mom went to the temple. The next day I went too. After lighting the incense, I knelt before the Bodhisattva and remembered a fortune teller I once met as a child. He said I would live to be 90. I'm 25 this year, and Mr. Wilson is 30. So I prayed to the Bodhisattva. Liam is willing to trade 30 years of his life for James's health and peace for the rest of his. Around noon, the door was gently pushed open. Liam tiptoed in. Seeing my eyes were closed, he carefully leaned in close. He gently lifted my arm and put it down, then lifted the blanket to take a look. Just as he was about to leave, I lifted my arm, hooked it around the back of his neck, and opened my eyes. What are you looking for? Liam froze in his bent-over position and whispered, "Where's the notebook?" I squinted and smiled. Confiscated. Okay. The tips of Liam's ears started to turn red, and his eyes darted around, not knowing where to look. "James, don't move," I said, gently touching his face. "Let me get a good look at you." Liam obediently stayed still, his eyes shining like a small galaxy. After a long while, I raised my hand to cover his eyes and, through the back of my hand, gave him a light kiss. His soft lashes fluttered against my palm. Liam slowly half-knelt, his eyes still closed. He made a small gap with his index finger and thumb and asked softly, "James, right now, do you like me even a little bit?" I moved my hand away, took his 2 fingers and pulled them a little further apart, and smiled. A little more than a little bit. Liam's gaze shifted from his fingers to my face. As he looked at me, his eyes suddenly turned red. "Then can you?" Liam's words trailed off as his eyes filled with tears. I understood his unspoken plea, but the cure rate was too low. I didn't want to drag him down with me, to have him suffer for nothing. "James."
Yeah.
I forced a small smile and, turning my hand over, wiped away his tears. "Liam, I hope you live a long and happy life." After that time, I vomited blood. The stomach pains became more frequent. I spent more and more time upstairs. Around early spring, the rains became more frequent. It rained for a week straight, and today it finally cleared up. I had just finished washing up after getting out of bed when Liam came upstairs with breakfast. There were a full 6 dishes. Why so much? Liam pulled out a chair for me. You didn't eat all day yesterday. Grandma told me to make sure you get yesterday's nutrients back. I raised an eyebrow. So, are we still eating lunch? Yes. Grandma said at least 8 dishes for lunch. After eating half a bowl of porridge, I put down my spoon and stared into space. Liam glanced at me, said nothing, and simply took the bowl and finished the rest of the porridge in a few bites. There was too much left over to explain, so Liam packed up some of the grain-based foods and took me to the woods to feed the birds. By the time we got back, the sun was fully out. I wanted to sit in the front yard for a while, but Liam covered my eyes and pushed me forward. Where are we going? I asked with a laugh. Liam didn't say anything, acting all mysterious. But I could roughly sense that we were heading to the backyard. It wasn't until we stopped that Liam removed his hand. Open your eyes, James. I slowly opened my eyes. Next to the vegetable patch in the backyard, a new flower garden had been created. All sorts of flowers were crowded together inside a fence, at different heights, in more colors than I could count. Liam stood behind me and asked softly, James, does it look a little bit like the one from your memory? A lump instantly formed in my throat. I swallowed a couple of times before I could find my voice. It's very similar. Liam hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Then can you help me take care of it? In the silence, my vision started to blur. I can't take good care of it. After a long time, Liam asked in a muffled voice, Why? I let out a soft breath and turned to face him. Liam, the more you invest in me, the harder it will be for you to move on later. Liam looked away. I don't understand. After a standoff, I gave up. If you don't understand, then forget it. Just as I was about to leave, Liam grabbed my hand. His eyes red too. When he spoke, his voice was already a little choked. James, I know treatment is painful. I have no right to interfere with your choice, but I looked up and cut him off. What about you? You suffer through months of agony with a tiny bit of hope, only to end up with nothing. It will take you twice as long to get over it. So you're afraid of being a burden to me, right, James? But I love you, so it's not a burden. If you get better, then our future is something we fought for together. I looked away, swallowing the lump in my throat, and said weakly, a cure rate of less than 30%. What is that if not a burden? Liam, you once said, if you didn't do something, you'd regret it for the rest of your life. You've done more than enough now. There's no need to go through those months of suffering. You're only 25. You'll meet many more, better. Liam suddenly hugged me, pressing his face tightly against my temple, hot tears falling into my collar. I won't, James. It doesn't matter how good other people are. You're the best in my heart. Actually, I lied to you. I'm very greedy. I don't just want to take care of you for a while. I want to take care of you for a lifetime. James, I'm begging you, let's just try. Okay? Liam cried for 3 days and finally softened James's heart. He agreed to go to the US for treatment. The doctor who saw him was Liam's uncle. When James's test results came back, his uncle immediately chewed them both out. He said if they had come a week later, they might as well have just bought a ticket home. Liam covered James's ears. His uncle was speechless. He continued to lecture them while arranging for James's admission to the hospital. Then he brought in 3 highly experienced clinical experts to discuss a treatment plan. Through genetic testing, they found a target in James's tumor cells. The good news was that a targeted drug developed for this target had just been launched in the US. The bad news was that the matching rate for this drug was less than 10%. His uncle told them to think it over carefully. James squeezed the hand under the table, which was trembling with anxiety, and smiled at his uncle. We're already here. The next day, the treatment plan was finalized, and James's ordeal began. To say it was like being skinned alive would not be an exaggeration. The endless pain and vomiting tormented James until he could barely breathe. In less than a month, he had wasted away. Liam lost weight too. James thought it was from crying. Every time he helped clean up James's vomit, Liam would hold him and cry silently. He would cry when he saw him unable to eat. He would cry when he saw him curled up in pain and spasming. Midway through the treatment, Liam became much stronger, because he felt that James was about to give up. The ever-strong James would also stare at the ceiling and cry silent tears. The moment Liam held him, his tears would flow uncontrollably. His thin chest would rise and fall as he whispered and begged, "Liam, let's stop the treatment. Okay?" This was the only time in his life Liam was ever harsh with James. No matter how James asked or pleaded, his answer was always no. He even fiercely threatened James, saying that if he dared to give up, he would dare to jump into a river with rocks in his pockets. Let's see who dies first. James was so scared and angry that he clawed at his arm like a cat, cursing him as a bastard. Liam laughed and agreed, and when he saw James was out of breath from cursing, he even helped him curse himself. But at least it stopped him from thinking about giving up. James cried more and more often. Sometimes he would deliriously hug Liam and call for his mom. Sometimes he would cry in his sleep. Liam felt that James had cried all the tears of a lifetime, his own included. So he firmly believed that after they got through this, their future life would be filled with only smiles. It seemed that Liam's prayer to the Bodhisattva had come true. His uncle, barely containing his excitement, told him that James's lesion was shrinking. In that moment, Liam tilted his head back and stared at the ceiling for a full 2 minutes, barely holding back his tears. Despite the less than 10% matching rate for the targeted drug, James had become the lucky one. The autumn leaves fell, and the treatment entered its final stage. When James proactively said he wanted to eat something, Liam couldn't help but get red-eyed again. James reached out and caught the round tear, looking up at his Liam, his eyes curving into a smile. The days slipped by. The illness had not broken James's spirit. Under Liam's careful care, he was slowly regaining his strength. On a sunny day before winter set in, Liam pushed James down to the garden to bask in the sun. James closed his eyes in contentment. When he stretched his arms towards the sun, in that moment, Liam felt that the seed he had personally planted had broken through its hard shell, pierced through the cold, damp soil, and finally sprouted tender shoots. His lover was thriving. This moment was worth recording. So Liam took out his phone, captured the scene, printed it as a wallet-sized photo, and put it in a compartment in his wallet. James's condition improved day by day. The medication was reduced daily, and his uncle's rounds became more frequent, until a month later when he walked in on his nephew kissing his patient. His patient even winked at him after noticing him, as if to say sorry. This was just too much. His uncle immediately made the decision: discharge. The freedom came so suddenly that the two were too excited to sleep all night. The next day, his uncle personally saw them to the hospital entrance. The driver his brother had sent to pick them up was already waiting by the roadside. James's energy was not what it used to be. Not long after getting into the car, he started yawning and leaned against Liam's shoulder. The sunlight streamed through the car window, softly illuminating his jade-like face. Liam looked down at this incredibly heart-stirring sight, and for words came to his mind, just like the first time.